into your kingdom and into your mission. Help us, Lord. Help us open ourselves up to hear you, to be in your presence. Help us to experience your word in ways that moves us, inspires us, encourages us, empowers us to become more like you and to make a kingdom-sized impact, no matter who we are. Gracious Lord, speak this to each of us, all of us, whether through my voice or in spite of it. For this we pray. Amen. So as I said, this is would be our second week in a story, the journey to Bethlehem. If we had met last week, you would have heard about Mary, and unfortunately Mary's getting a little left out this year. I'll have to incorporate her some into some of the other stories a little bit later, but she doesn't get her own week. But this week we're going to focus on Joseph. Joseph, a humble man, a man of God who makes a kingdom-sized impact despite not getting a lot of fame, a lot of popularity, not a lot of notoriety. So there's a couple myths that kind of swirl around Joseph. Because so little is mentioned of him, and we don't really know a whole lot about him, and there is a kind of a Catholic and Orthodox belief that Joseph was an older gentleman, that he would have been his second marriage with Mary, and that he had some other children through that marriage. And this particular belief is kind of how they also kind of help explain Mary's perpetual virginity. And then there's like the Protestant side, and the Protestants tend to go with a younger Joseph. And one of the books that I've been using to help kind of to put this series together is a book called The Journey, written by Adam Hamilton. There's a study, I left it down at the other campus for those of you who go to Sunday school if you want to use that. It'll give you a precursor to my sermon each week. So there's this story, though, of Joseph. And Adam Hamilton kind of goes with the Protestant belief, which is more where I would tend to stay. And so if we use Hamilton's version, Joseph is probably about the age of a normal young man in a time that would get married, which puts Joseph around 15 or 16. Both Protestants and Orthodox and the Catholic Church all kind of put Mary in that 12 to 14 range, that she really is the young woman that's just on that prime of when they would normally get married back then. So we have this young man. And I'm choosing to use the Protestant side on this time, not only because I'm Protestant, but also because it helps with the story some. And Joseph was from Bethlehem, the city of David. Joseph was probably, he was probably the type of kid that, like I imagine most kids in that town, probably like to pretend to be the great King David. You know, if that's their hometown hero, I can't imagine how many of them ran around and were like, I'm David today, and you have to be Goliath, and so on and so forth. And they probably, reenacted that scene out in hundreds of different ways over the years since it had happened. And it was a city full of bakers and farmers and craftsmen and tradesmen that probably got a lot of their business from Jerusalem. And what we know about Joseph is we know he was a carpenter. And in those days, in Israel, a lot of houses were not made out of wood, they were made out of stone. So chances are a majority of what Joseph probably made were things like furniture and tools for the farmers. He probably was the one that helped make sure all of their farm equipment was in good working order. He would have been the person that made the doors and those kind of things. And we know that Joseph wasn't a master carpenter, because the name or the word that's used in the writing just puts him as a workman, not a master workman, which has a particular add-on to the front arc. And it is, like you've heard of archangels, maybe they're kind of lead angels. So he wasn't a master carpenter. He's just a normal, everyday carpenter who lived here in the city of David. And he got betrothed to a woman named Mary from this town of Nazareth, which was way up north, on multiple hours, maybe even days' journey north. And there's a good chance that he may have met her once, but they probably didn't really know each other. Jewish custom in those days was that kind of the families would arrange a marriage, and once the marriage was arranged, you were considered betrothed, and then you had to wait a year, and then they would come together, and there would be the small ceremony, there would be the consummation of the marriage, and there would kind of be a moving in, and so on and so forth. And so it's believed that they're in this 1 year period, and chances are Mary is probably living at home with her parents in Nazareth, and Joseph probably still living down in Bethlehem. And during this year, Mary gets a visit from the angel. And the angel tells Mary that, behold, you are going to be with child. And she says, let it be done to me as you will. And so it's done. And then we find out that when Mary's about, 3 months pregnant or so, she decides to travel to her aunt's house, Elizabeth's house. And so Elizabeth's house is believed to be in this little town that's kind of about 2 miles away from Bethlehem. And so this is probably where Joseph comes up and visits her. And Mary's down here at her aunt's house, and Joseph's like, now that she's so close, I should go up and see this woman that I'm betrothed to. I should go, talk to her, maybe, get to know her a little bit before, the big day, and so on and so forth. And Joseph gets up there, and he finds out that, lo and behold, she's pregnant. Joseph finds out that she's with child, and the story that she has to give him is that child is from the Holy Spirit. Now, I don't know about you folks, but I think that if I was engaged to a young lady and I know I haven't done anything with that young lady, and she came to me and told me that she was suddenly pregnant with a child and that it was by the Holy Spirit, I'd be a little bit skeptical, right? I'd be thinking that there's some other guy on the scene. Even if she's the most upright and noble person I've ever met, being told that God is the father of the child is kind of a little out there. And so Joseph is kind of upset, I'm sure. In fact, I bet he's devastated. This is probably the worst day of his life, especially if he's a young man. He's been probably pretty excited about the fact that he's going to get married, and he's probably pretty excited that he's going to get to meet this girl, and that this is the girl he's going to spend the rest of his life with, and then he ends up showing up, and he probably thinks that she's cheated on him. I mean, I can't imagine how devastating that would be for him. How angry he probably was. And this is kind of where the story picks up. It tells us that Joseph decides that he's going to dismiss her secretly. And this kind of tells us a lot about Joseph. See, Joseph probably got angry, probably heard about this child from Mary, and he probably decided, you know what, I'm gonna walk back home. I don't want to be here now. And he probably was walking home, and he was probably pretty heartbroken. And yet, even in his heartbreak and his heartache, he realizes that if he goes and he tells the world, the community about Mary and how she's pregnant, they're going to stone her to death. They're going to shame her and stone her, and that'll be it for Mary. But on the other hand, if he sends her away secretly and then she has the child, people are going to think that he's the father, and they're going to think that he was the kind of man that got what he wanted and then, sent her away. And so the shame will be on him, and chances are her family will have pity on her, and they'll take care of her and the baby, and everything will be okay, and he'll still have to pay the rest of the dowry and stuff. And if her dad insists, he'll still have to marry her. But it will spare her from being stoned to death. It's a choice between his honor and her life. And even in his anger and heartbreak, he decides that her life and the life of that child is more important than his honor. we get an image of a pretty honest, hardworking guy here. I mean, we know he's a carpenter. He's got to be hardworking. There's no way to survive if he's not. But here's a guy that really thinks about others. He doesn't worry about what this is going to do to his reputation. He is worried about marrying the child even while he is upset at her. And that's when the angel appears. And he appears to Joseph in a dream, and the angel says to Joseph, Joseph, go ahead and marry her, because the child within her is the child of God. And not only that, I need you to name that child Jesus, because this child is going to save everyone from their sins. God takes what is probably the worst day of Joseph's life, and he flips it upside down on its head. I mean, here is the worst possible scenario going on for Joseph. And God is like, no, Joseph, I am doing something here. And Joseph gets to know for the next however many months of Mary's pregnancy that child that's coming out of Mary, that is the Son of God. He gets to know that he gets to be dad to God incarnate. And he doesn't go around and doesn't go tell everyone, hey, you got to be my son is the Son of God, and my wife, she gave birth to the Son of God. He doesn't go around and try to build up fame for himself. He lives his life. And I imagine what it was like to be Joseph, because he's probably, he's still doing his carpentry work, and, they moved to Nazareth together after the baby's born, and I just imagine what it's like to have, little Jesus coming up and learning how to do carpentry and teaching Jesus what it's like to be a carpenter. And I imagine what it's like for Joseph to try to instruct the God of the universe who defines right and wrong, morality. To be that parent to the one who knows all things, the one who's made all things. And man, Joseph got to have an incredible influence in Jesus' life. I mean, our parents probably influence us more than almost anyone else in our entire life. And Joseph, he gets to be there and do that for Jesus. And Hamilton writes in his book that, Jesus, he thinks Jesus' life reflects that relationship of Joseph and Jesus. He talks about how, I kind of mentioned this earlier, how Jesus says that to relate to God, you should call him Abba, Father, Daddy. I mean, that probably is a direct tie to the relationship, the closeness that Jesus got to have with Joseph. And you hear the story of the prodigal son and the father in the prodigal son story. He sees his son coming home after screwing up, after doing all of these things wrong. And what does the father do? He runs and embraces him. And that makes me think that Joseph was the kind of dad that, when things went wrong, when Jesus may have messed up a little bit or any of the other kids messed up, he was the kind of dad that would be like, it's okay, son. And embrace him. And that gives Jesus these images, these humanly images that he can use to talk to all of the other people, to the disciples about how God in heaven is like our worldly dads. Incredible. So we have Joseph. The story of an ordinary, everyday person who is almost unremarkable in any of the world's standards. Getting to be the father of Jesus and having it happen after probably what is one of the worst days anyone can imagine. Having the greatest turnaround in a day and in a life that anyone can imagine. And this story, I think, really is our invitation. That each of us, as ordinary people, God has something great that he can do in our lives. And he has a calling for us, and he has something to tell us that he wants us to do, and we can have a kingdom-sized impact. And again, we may not have our names entered down into history and for posterity for all the generations to come, but we may still impact the world in such a way that for decades and centuries and millennia to come, the things that we did as ordinary, everyday persons who are absolutely and totally in love with God make a difference. That changed just everything that was about to happen. And the thing is that it may also be that we may be being called from a place where we are in deep pain and hurt. That maybe we are at a time in our lives where we are suffering. And where some of the worst things that we ever possibly imagined could be going on in our lives are happening right now. And the thing is that invitation also shows us in Joseph's story that God may be working in that too. That God may be planning on turning that around and saying that, yeah, I know you're in pain right now. I know that you're suffering, that you're hurting, but you know what? I'm doing something. And you're my key player in this thing. I'm gonna take this pain that you're feeling right now, and I'm gonna turn it around, and I'm gonna give you a role in my story. And you're gonna get to have an impact. You're gonna get to change the world. And you're gonna get to be a part of something so much bigger than yourself, and something beyond anything that you can ever imagine. And I want that for you. So as we draw closer to Christmas, as we journey together towards the coming and the celebration of Jesus' coming and towards the new year, I want us to journey with an openness to hear where God is calling us into his story. I want us to journey with a hope that even if we're in a dark place, that God is going to take that place and he's going to flip it around and he is going to make something great happen. Because that's who he is. And he comes and calls the ordinary people from the unordinary places, and he does some of the greatest things with us. So let us be the people that are open to God's movement and God's call. Amen.